If you're new to my channel, this is... Must we breathe so loud, baby? If you're familiar with my channel or any of the work that we do at the Humanitarian Changemakers Network, this is definitely not going to be a new concept for you. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the 4 different types of work that we can engage in throughout our lives and how we can kind of shift our mindset from just like our kind of primary job or source of income as being the only way in which we can create a meaningful life for ourselves. And this is particularly relevant to people who are working in the social impact space or change makers or even just polymaths who are wanting to live a more purposeful life. Now, I think it's important to define what I mean when I talk about work. And I define work as any kind of activity that we engage in for an intention or a specific purpose. So anything that we're engaging with and, there's intention behind it, we're having to put in or exert effort, and we're expecting to get something out of it, that is what I would define as work. Now, this distinction between the 4 types of work comes from Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. And she talks about these 4 types of work to kind of distinguish between the ways in which people who are creatives or people who are wanting to live a creative life might engage with their creative practice. And I really like this distinction, and I extend it to any of the work that we might do as social change makers. Now, Elizabeth Gilbert's distinction is personally the one distinction or framework for thinking about work that I have come back to time and time again. There are lots of different frameworks out there for kind of thinking about work and the ways that we engage in work, but this seems to be the one that I am just constantly drawn back to. It seems to be the one that makes the most sense and the one that is the most useful when thinking about my relationship with my own work. So I kind of categorize these 4 different types of work depending on 2 variables. Now, this is not how Gilbert distinguishes them, but I find it particularly useful. And it's the 2 variables being the commitment that is required within that type of work and how well it aligns with our values or our passions. So based on these 2 variables, we kind of get this quadrant of 4 different types of work. Now, the first type of work is our hobbies. And hobbies are activities that we engage in. They're very low stakes. There's not a lot of risk involved. It's something that you're engaging in because it's something that you are passionate about or something that you get a lot of enjoyment or fulfillment out of. You're not expecting to gain a lot out of it other than that enjoyment or the satisfaction that you might get. So here we're talking about things like any kind of creative activity that you might do, a sport you might play, any kind of volunteering or community service that you might do on a volunteer basis could be considered a hobby. And you might have to invest a little bit of time or a little bit of your own money, but you're not expecting to be financially compensated or anything like that for it. You're just getting that personal fulfillment out of it. It's also very low commitment because if you don't stick to a particular schedule or you need to take a break from that activity, there's not a lot of ramifications. So a hobby is a really important type of work that we engage in. I think that hobbies are particularly important when it comes to our passions in life. And I engage in a number of different hobbies, from my creative practice to my permaculture practice. There are lots of different ways that we can engage in a hobby, but hobbies are the first type of work. Now, the next type of work is a job, and a job is what we think of when we think of the type of work we engage in a capitalist society. It's where we are going and we are exchanging our time or our labor in exchange for money. Now, a job is not something that has to align with our values or our passions, and oftentimes it's not. And it's also not particularly high commitment in terms of the context that we're talking about. You might think that yes, a job requires a lot of commitment because you're committed to showing up every day. But if we think about how a job fits in the broader context of our own lives, a job probably doesn't require that much commitment because at the end of the day, you could go and find another job. A job in the context that we're talking about it is where it's really just a means to an end. So for me, I was a dancer of the exotic variety for a decade. That was a job for me. It was something that I went and I did. I had set hours and I kind of walked in the doors and I played that role. I did that job. And when I walked out of the doors at the end of the night, I went back to my normal life. There was a very clear distinction between my work and my personal life. And the main reason I engaged in that, yes, it allowed me to build a lot of, soft skills in terms of my communication and all that. But the primary reason I engaged in that job and I stuck to it for 10 years was because it gave me a great deal of financial freedom. It allowed me to live a lifestyle that I was content with while also pursuing my other passions and interests and building my career. So that brings us to the next type of work, which is a career. And a career is often made up of a number of jobs over a long period of time. A career can evolve a little bit, but generally there's some kind of theme to the career, whether it is a particular field or industry that we are interested in, or a particular set of skills that we have. And our career will typically either involve some kind of formal education or training. Now, a career has more commitment involved than a job because unlike a job where it's, we're thinking about that job as an individual insular thing, we can always go and find a new job, whereas we can't often go and start a new career, or we don't want to start a new career. A career involves a lot more commitment over the span of our lives. It involves a lot of personal work, personal education, things kind of beyond just the jobs that we do themselves. Your career probably requires you to network outside of the job. It requires you to be constantly skilling up and learning new things. It requires you to maybe be, positioning yourself as a thought leader on LinkedIn or anything like that. There's always more commitment and more work involved in a career, and it is a longer term thing, so it involves more commitment. It also can align with your personal values and your passions, but not always. I think that's where, if we're thinking about my little quadrant model, the career, it varies a lot. For some people, we build a career because it's something that we will enjoy. It's something that we believe that we will get value out of ourselves, but it will also allow us to contribute. But I don't think it has that same degree of alignment with our passions or our purpose as the next type of work. And the next type of work is our vocation. Now, a vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, which means to call. So it is your calling in life. It is the thing that you believe you are put on this earth to do. And I often distinguish between, our calling as either being your mission or your purpose. And there's not a big distinction between the two. I think the two are different ways of conceptualizing the same thing. I think that a lot of people who are more spiritual or maybe have a religious belief system that they kind of ascribe to will believe more so that we have a purpose. There's something that, God or, the universe put us here to do, something that is kind of innate to us. Whereas a mission, I believe, is something that we determine for ourselves. A lot of people don't think that there is any kind of inherent purpose or meaning to life. And so a mission is a way of giving yourself a specific purpose. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way to go about it. I think both are completely valid, and they're both referring to the same thing. They just have different ways of kind of conceptualizing the source of that thing. But your calling is your vocation. And when we think about our calling or our purpose or our mission, it's the thing that we were put on this earth to do. And that is like the truest alignment with our passion or our values. And there are a number of different ways we can engage in work when it comes to our vocation, whether that is through a number of different passion projects that we do. Maybe it is through aspects of our career or through a job. But the important thing and the distinction that Gilbert makes is that a career can be taken away from you. A job can be taken away from you. Hobbies can be taken away from you. But your calling in life, cannot be taken away from you. It's always there, whether you are living it or whether you are not, you will always have that same calling. And so I like to think of, you know, my vocation being the work that I do across the social change space, and in particular, educating other people about theories of change and social change. I would consider that my career is both my research, but also work I do kind of consulting in terms of impact strategy and theory of change. But my vocation, or my calling, the thing I love to do, is to educate and teach other people about how they can have an impact. And that's what I do in my work with the Humanitarian Changemakers Network. And I imagine that that is work that I will be doing throughout the rest of my life. So those are the 4 different types of work we engage in. And often we will engage in all of these at once. I know that for the majority of my adult life, I have engaged in some way or form all 4 of those. You know, I've always had hobbies. I, used to create travel vlogs, and I would travel, and that was a hobby of mine. I worked my job at the club. I was also studying at the same time and building my career as a social impact strategist and as a social science researcher. And I've always been kind of engaging in this work and building the Humanitarian Changemakers Network. And in there, I did lots of volunteering and, all sorts of things. So we're often engaging in these different types of work. And so it's a really great way, I think, of just kind of giving us a new lens through which we can conceptualize the way we engage in work. And I think it's useful because it helps us take the pressure off ourselves if we are perhaps working a job that doesn't necessarily align with our passions or our purpose or our mission in life. And it allows us to recognize that engaging in the work that we might do as a change maker or as a creative person or as a polymath or whatever it might be, it's totally okay and it's totally valid for us not to monetize that and for that to always remain our vocation, or for us to just engage in things in a really kind of fun and playful way through our hobbies. And I hope that framework is something that you find a lot of value in. I know it's something that I've found a lot of value in. And if you are somebody who is kind of interested in creating a positive social impact through the work that you do, I encourage you to check out our Aligned Agents of Change bundle that we have. It's a completely free bundle at the School of Social Impact. And we go through a framework where I teach you how to identify your inner compass. So getting clear on your values, your passions, and your purpose in life. And then we have an ebook. It's called Doing the Work of Change, or Doing the Work as a Change Maker. And it kind of walks you through what those 4 different types of work look like in the context of the work you might do across the social change space. Then we also have another bonus activity. And another one, if you are new to the world of social change, is our social change handbook, The Change Maker in You. I briefly talk about those 4 types of work in the introduction, and it kind of sets up the rest of the handbook where we go through a really simple framework for social change and how you might, as an individual, engage in activities that bring about these different types of change. That is part of our Introduction to Social Change bundle. I forget what the bundle is actually called, but we have that ebook and as an audiobook completely free. So lots of great resources and tools that I've created at the School of Social Impact. As I mentioned, this is my vocation, this is my calling. I really want to get as much resources and tools and education out there to people who are wanting to make a difference in the world through whatever kind of work it is as I can. So I'll leave those linked in the description below. Other than that, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on the different types of work and how you engage in these different types of work in your life, particularly if you are someone who would consider yourself to be a polymath or a change maker.